How to use the date object in JavaScript to create an epic countdown timer. Now we're going to go ahead and navigate to our scripts.js file. And first what we need to do is create a variable called target date, and we want to make this equal to a new date, and here is where you're going to want to get the date of the event that you want to count down to. And in our case, we want to go ahead and count down to Christmas time. So we want to put our month as 3 characters, our day as 2 characters here, followed by a comma. Put in the year of your event. So at this point, this is just the date of your event. And then we need to specify an exact time. So I'm just going to put 00 by 00 by 00, which is going to represent midnight, December 25th, 2024, and you guys can change this to whatever time you want. And from here, to show you guys what's going on with this built-in JavaScript date object, I'm going to use console.log and log out our target date variable. And now if I go ahead and open the console over here, you guys are going to see that it just logs out the time. But what we need to do so we can actually perform calculations to this date here is we need to use our getTime JavaScript built-in method here. And what this is going to do is it's going to give us the milliseconds here from January 1st, 1970 all the way up until the target date that we entered right here. So now we're logging out milliseconds here. And for now, I'll go ahead and delete this, but continue to use console.logs here if you guys get lost at any point, because it'll really help you out. Next, we want to be able to target each one of our days, hours, minutes, and seconds elements here. So what we need to do is go back to our index.html, and right here for our first H2 element, we want to include an ID equal to days. And we'll go ahead and copy this, paste it in for our hours, change this out to hours, do the same for our minutes here, change this to mins, and then go ahead and include it again for our seconds and change this to seconds. Now that we have these IDs set up, we can go back to our JavaScript file and we need to create 4 variables to target each one of those elements here to dynamically change them every second so it updates correctly. So what we'll do is use our let keyword and create a variable called day_elem, and what we need to use here is our document.getElement by ID, and we want to get our days ID, and then we need to create another one down here. So we'll go ahead and copy this and just paste it down below. Change this to our_elem, change our ID to hours to get our hours, paste it again, change this to min_elem, and now we need to get our mins ID, and then we just need to do it one more time, but for our seconds. So we'll call this second_elem, and we need to get our seconds ID. Now we have a variable that's targeting each one of our elements here. What we need to do is create a variable using our let keyword called countdown timer, and we're going to make this equal to our set interval built-in JavaScript function here. And you guys will see that that sets up a callback function within our set interval JavaScript function. So what we need to do is first we need to change out the interval here. So this is going to be how often you want to refresh your code here. We want to refresh it every second, so we display down to the seconds the time remaining until our event. So to do this, we need to go ahead and put 1000, which is going to be how many milliseconds are in a second. And so now our function here is going to run every second. So it's going to refresh our page every second and correctly display the time. And with our set interval function here, we don't need to call this. It is automatically called when our code runs. Inside of here, we're going to create a variable called now. And here we want to create another date object. But for this one, we want to get the current date. So if we don't specify anything within our date object here, it's going to get the current time, meaning right now at the present moment. And we need to again get the milliseconds using our get time built-in function. So if I use console.log to show our now a variable over here in the console, you guys will see that it shows the milliseconds of the exact moment right now every second, because that's how often this function is going to run. And if we go ahead and take away this get time function here, it will simply print the current time right here. But for now, we'll go ahead and change that back and get rid of our console.log. Next, we'll create another variable, and this one is going to be called our time diff. And here, we're going to be performing a basic calculation. So what we need to do is get our target date and subtract our now. So what we're gonna do is subtract the milliseconds of our target date. And so what we're doing here is subtracting the current time in milliseconds from the target date time in milliseconds. Now we're gonna get into the exciting part. So we're gonna create another variable called days, make this equal to math.floor. And this might look confusing, but all this does is let us use math, and then this just rounds down the number that we include within the parentheses. So what we need to do is get the amount of days remaining. So first we need to start off with our time diff variable, and we need to divide by days, but divide by days in milliseconds, because this is in milliseconds here. So to calculate days in milliseconds, what we need to do is use parentheses here, put 1000 for milliseconds, multiply this by 60 again, and then by 24 here. So all this is doing is it's showing days in milliseconds. And now to actually display this dynamically onto our page, what we need to do is use our day_lem variable, change the inner text of this variable, and make that equal to our days variable. Now over here on the right, you guys can successfully see the correct days left until Christmas, and this is only going to display whole days. It's not going to display partial days. Now we need to do the same thing but for hours. So we'll go ahead and copy this, paste it down below, change our variable here to hours. And we obviously need to change our calculation here. So I'll delete all of this except for our time diff variable. And when I was doing it, I was running into a problem. So what I had to do was I had to subtract 1 hour right off the bat from our time diff. So to do this, I can use the minus sign and calculate an hour in milliseconds by multiplying 1000 by 60 by 60. And so all this is doing is subtracting 1 hour from the time diff variable here. Next, we need to use our modulus operator, which is basically the same thing as a division sign, but what this is going to do is it's going to divide, but it's going to give you the remaining value and not the quotient. And at this point, we're going to include the calculation that we used for our days here. And again, this just shows a day in milliseconds. And then we need to divide all of this by an hour. So we'll go ahead and use our hour here and just paste it like so. And I accidentally put the wrong division sign here. This needs to be a backslash. And now all I have to do is display this on the page. So I'll go ahead and copy and paste this down below, change this to our hour_lem, and then we want this to equal our hours like so. And then I accidentally messed up something very basic on this calculation. I need to go ahead and include this first calculation here in parentheses so it will run first before finding the remainder and then dividing here. And then here, for some reason, this element screwed up. This should just be hour_lem. And once I correct that, it will now be displaying the remaining whole days and whole hours. And then before we created this calculation for hours, I told you that I personally had a problem with it. But if you guys are not having the problem where it's including an extra hour, go ahead and use this calculation here, this is exactly the same, except we're not subtracting an hour up top here. Now we just need to set up our minutes and seconds. So we'll create a minutes element here. And at this point, our calculations are going to get much easier. And here we just need to use our time diff, subtract by hours and milliseconds. And here we can just go ahead and copy this from up top and just paste it right in here. Next, we can create our minutes variable here, and we want to make this equal to, again, math.floor. And for this calculation, we want to use our time diff again, but we want to find the remainder using the modulus operator, and we need to use our hour in milliseconds here again. So we'll just go ahead and paste it in. So at this point, we're going to use our time diff variable, divide it by an hour in milliseconds, but we only want to provide the remainder here. And after that, we simply want to divide by 1 minute in milliseconds. So we'll say 1000 times 60 for 1 minute in milliseconds. And then all we need to do here is use our min_lem.inner text and make this equal to minutes. And now we're going to display the proper minutes here. And now all we have to do is set up our seconds, which is what you're going to see refresh every second. So what we'll do is create one more variable up here called seconds, make this equal to math.floor so we can round down only for whole seconds. And here we want to use our time diff variable and find the remainder again using the modulus. And here we want to provide minutes in milliseconds again. So we'll say 1000 times 60. And then we need to divide all of this by 1000 to convert milliseconds back into seconds. And then at this point, we can just target our second lem.inner text and make this equal to seconds. And now you guys can see that our countdown is successfully working over here down to the second. Now the last thing we want to do is create that epic animation that's going to look like snowfall falling down our page. So to do that, tap here to see what happens next.